Okay, now folks should be able to hear me virtually and in the room. So, hi everyone, my name is Mira Streeter. I am president of City Club. Welcome thank you very much for making your way downtown to be here for one of the City Club's longest standing traditions, the presentation of a City Club research report. Tonight, we will receive a briefing from the Ranked Choice Voting Ballot Measures Study Committee. And you have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. Before we jump into our program, I would like to introduce the other members of the Board of Governors. Please raise your hand as I call out your name, and would love for folks to give a little cheer for those that are here today. John Stride, President-elect. Chris Howard, Secretary. Ted K. Treasurer, who's going to be here today. He's done a lot of work. Mark Siffin, past president. Bobby Regan. Carla Kelly. Thanks for being here, Carla. Patty Tillett.
Virtually here.
Nice to hear you, Patty. Jordan Cole. Sam Metz. Win Huelica. Jordan Cox. Ramsey Witt.
Virtually here.
Robin Denberg. Colleen Schumacher. Mary Nichols. And Conklin Conkle. Your Board of Governors is responsible for and should receive credit for putting City Club back together and, among other things, making City Club research possible again. We will hear brief announcements about upcoming programs following the research report presentation and discussion. Now I'm going to turn over tonight's program. To start us off, I'll ask John Stride, the research board chair, to say a few words. 2 words. A few words.
You can count.
Just 2.
Thank you, Mara. As you know, the research board is responsible for organizing, selecting research, selecting ballot measure topics. And this year we landed on the ranked choice voting ballot measure for a couple of reasons. One, it's an interesting topic and it's got national reach. It's important for Oregon. Besides, the legislature took care of a couple of issues we really want to study, like Measure 110 issues and a couple others. But good for them. I'd like to introduce the research board to you. Serving on the research board this year are Chris Smith, Jordan Cole, Blake Van Valkenburg, Spencer Ehrman, Lloyd Streisinger, and Meredith Savory. It's been a hardworking board this year, and we've been overseeing the ranked choice voting study report, which is one of our responsibilities. You'll hear from that study committee today. We also have comprehensive studies that we're responsible for, and right now we have a comprehensive study group studying participatory budgeting, an issue that Portland will very likely take on. And if you think you know enough about it, you know this much. It's a huge topic. I didn't know that. But our committee is digging in deep. If you've served on a study committee before, and I know some of you have, you know that by the end of your study, you've become an expert in the subject matter of your study. And that our committee today that you'll hear from is no exception. They've dug deep and they really do know their stuff. I'd like to introduce Jordan Cole, who's the research board advisor to the Ranked Choice Voting Study Committee. And I'll introduce them. Thank you, Jordan.
Hello and welcome. My name is Jordan Cole and I serve as the research advisor for the City Club of Portland's Ballot Measure Study Committee for Measure 117 of Oregon Ranked Choice Voting. This committee, originally chaired by Katie Lorish, includes, and please don't apply for every single one of these names, because at the risk of not being there, we'll ask you to save that when we actually introduce our hosts at the end. The committee, originally chaired by Katie Lorish, includes William Krieger, Robin Denberg, Walker Griffith, Peter Miller, Michaela Parker, and John Williams. Before I introduce our hosts for tonight's Q&A, I want to take a moment to thank them for their incredible hard work. Over the last 3 months, they have met multiple times a week under tight deadlines to review academic literature, interview expert witnesses, and collate a diverse array of perspectives into a comprehensive report on a complex topic. I'd like to share a brief anecdote that I feel captures the strength of their work. Early on in their writing process, our authors were worried that their report would not be able to meet the scientific, rigorous standards that this topic merited within the time they had to write it. However, when your research board had the chance to review their first draft, they had one thing to say. Wow, this is really technical. Can you simplify that for us? Suffice to say that your authors have far exceeded their task. Now, will you please join me in offering a warm welcome and thank you to lead writer Kayla Parker and lead editor Clay Krieger.
Thanks, Jordan. You're right. Okay, I see the green going up and down, so I think that's a good sign. Okay, so the game plan is we're gonna go through a summary presentation that we've prepared. And I talked with some of the people here, and we've also prepped some additional slides for going into a little more detail on certain topics, and we're gonna hit some of those, and then we're gonna go into questions. And let me get into the slideshow. Okay, this is our summary report.
Are we presenting or are we just reading?
We're presenting. Oh, no. Oh, my, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so really basic strokes. Why are we talking about ranked choice voting all of a sudden? We are voting on it in a couple months. We will be voting on an Oregon-wide implementation of ranked choice voting. There's a couple different kinds of ranked choice voting. Oregon specifically will be implementing a voting system called IRV, which is instant runoff voting. And it basically works as a system of collecting votes, eliminating the lowest person in the vote pool, and then transferring votes from that person to a voter's second preference. For ranked choice voting, we are going to be implementing it in just about every, we are implementing it in just about every election. The only elections that are excluded are your state legislative elections, your local kind of county and city elections, but anything federally is going to be that. Any kind of council seats, the Bureau of Labor, all of those positions are going to be filled by a ranked choice system.
Non-partisan positions remain unaffected, and counties themselves don't have to actually adopt the voting method. It's up to them when they want to actually go through with that. Okay, just a quick summary of instant runoff ranked choice voting. So there's two important parts. Ranked choice is how you vote on your ballot, and instant runoff is how we would decide. And we'll go into more detail. There's different ways you can count even with ranked choice. So as Michaela said before, there's just a little graphic here that you have to get to 50% and you subsequently eliminate candidates with the least amount of votes, transfer their second choices to new candidates or the existing candidates, and repeat until you have something above 50%. And then, so the big issue that that ranked choice is trying to address is something called vote splitting. It's called betrayal. There's a lot of names for it, or it's something betrayal. But I just gave a simple example here where you have two centrists, Alice and Charlie. Bob is a liberal. If let's assume that the people who vote for Charlie, their second choice would be Alice. By voting for Charlie, they've actually given Bob the election. And you can see if they didn't vote for their first choice, then Alice would have won. And that's the quick summary there.
So that was, we couldn't tell which one.
I can't tell what, yeah.
Who's
Oh,
which is
sorry.
yellow and who's green.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. It's so small. Okay. Alice is blue. Charlie is green. Bob is yellow. So Bob would be the one who would win if everyone was voting for their actual top preference. And then if no one voted for Charlie, Charlie's green votes get transferred over and stacked on top of Alice, and she would have won.
All those green votes there, under our current plurality system, they didn't get a say in the election.
Yes, there's a concept called wasted votes. There's a lot of different ways to evaluate elections, but that's a major one where wasted votes essentially are votes that don't, if you took them away, the outcome wouldn't change.
We used to have, if nobody, like there's three, this is at, say the general election. If there were three people running, but nobody got 50%, there would be another election shortly after that, between the top two.
Yes, that's another way to do it. Subsequent rounds of elections to eliminate. This just sort of condenses it into one process, or ranked choice voting.
Why do the Charlie's votes go to the blue ones?
We're just assuming that because Alice and Charlie were both centrist candidates, and we're assuming that the Charlie voters would have preferred Alice, who's closer to their position, closer to their position politically, than Bob, who is more liberal.
So this basically is saying if they would have had another vote after that first one, that he would have won.
Right. And the challenge of the spoiler effect or the vote splitting is that after several decades of plurality voting and seeing this happen or maybe happen several times over, it's really encouraged people to start voting strategically. And instead of voting for a minority candidate that they may personally believe with or align with, they're instead allocating a vote to the most electable candidate, which is kind of keeping things in that siloed, very centrist for both parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and by voting for their honest candidate, they've actually sabotaged their own interests. If they if Charlie and Alice were sort of close on the priority list, but Bob, they really hated Bob because he's really far away, then they've sabotaged their own interest by voting honestly, which we don't like. So we'll start with sort of a summary of the arguments against. You are getting more information on the ballots, so voting takes more steps. I know that on for the Portland elections, which are not there'll be single transferable vote, but it's still ranked choice. They've got up to 13 candidates, which is a lot to rank. It's more complex, although you don't have to rank everything, and there are you don't even have to. You can like skip, and it'll still be counted. But yeah, and then tallying is more complex. With plurality, you just add votes. Pretty simple. In this process, it's multiple steps potentially. And it is harder to understand, and it's a less familiar, newer system as well. Cost is another one. They've estimated 6.5 million at the state level until 2027. That includes consultant fees, upgrading machines, voter education, things like that. And at the county level, they estimate 2.3 million fixed and 1.6 million in ongoing expenses. That I think it's mostly related to printing additional paper. It takes longer to fill up the newer ballots because there's more to rank, basically. There are potential for non-intuitive outcomes. We will go into more detail on those later on, and examples of those. And a lot of the people we interviewed didn't like the fact that the Senate and House of Representatives of Oregon excluded their own positions, although as we understand it, it was a political move to try to get it through. And there were also there's also feedback on the initial bill from some senators and from some of the public that that they didn't think it was the right time with trust low in the system. There was danger that there would be even less trust if something new was implemented. Oh, yeah. I forgot to say this at the beginning, but feel free to interrupt. There's no need to wait for us to finish.
Elections, like you said, in 3 different counties. And in Oregon, every step of the way, there's people from 2 different parties. So there's never just one party looking at the ballots or processing them or putting them through the machine or even collecting ballots. So to me, Oregon has a very high trust for our elections here.
There were, there were a lot of, there was, I guess this is sort of a different reason. There was a lot of feedback that, we'll mention this later as well, that it was a partisan move that would favor Democrats, was something that we heard in the bill feedback.
So I think that would, changing it would make, I mean, I wouldn't say with already low trust. That's all I'm saying. I think.
Okay, yeah.
I think there is a nationwide trend of distrust that is kind of only being ignited by the movement towards ranked choice voting. We've had several states actively move to like ban any kind of voting that is not plurality voting, mainly in response to big changes in ranked choice voting in other states and other cities.
Would this make primaries unnecessary?
It does not affect primaries, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, we neglected to mention that. Yes, primaries are unaffected except for that one position where it's eliminated, the Commissioner of Bureau and Labor and Industries.
Why that one?
I don't know.
Normally, from my understanding, that position is elected through effectively a primary, so they're just cutting out the primary process by using ranked choice.
Not
partisan race.
Yeah.
But when it says Says primary effective, but
It's not.
you're saying it's not effective.
Primaries are not, so primaries in Oregon, one, are closed, and two, can organize it however they want. So we are not imposing ranked choice on the primary process.
So does the Bureau of Labor Commissioner not have a Democrat candidate and a Republican?
It's technically a
candidate?
nonpartisan position, so
So
the
all the
pathway
others
to
are-
getting candidates is effectively a primary, and they're just eliminating that process by just doing ranked choice, which
I
is,
wonder why they didn't
kind
make
of a-
that part too. I mean, everything else is you pick the person for your party.
yeah,
They didn't do that.
Don't know.
I don't know on that one.
Just to clarify, it sounds like mostly it would only, this would only come into play if there were third-party candidates running in the general, is that?
Yes, so this is just for the general elections.
So if there
Um,
was a Democrat, Republican, and an independent, then it would remove that vote splitting.
Yes.
spoiler effect.
And also, I certainly see this, a lot of cities don't really get the big party involvement, like Oregon's Democratic Party is not going to get involved in like Corvallis's local politics to support a candidate necessarily. So you'll often have like 3 or 4 Democrats running or Republicans running, and they will, all run contiguously on the same platform necessarily, but you can rank those without having to go through the primary system.
And I will say something, it doesn't, if I said this earlier, I misspoke. This doesn't eliminate vote splitting. There are still scenarios where you can vote split in ranked choice voting, but we think it makes it a lot harder to do so. Yep.
Arguments in favor. I'm gonna spoil the ending a bit and say that this committee did conclude that we wanted to move forward and vote yes for ranked choice voting. And some of the reasons that we heard that influenced this decision that kind of led to that decision making. One was that spoiler effect, also known as vote splitting, nadir effect, if you were around at that point. There's a couple different reasons. We talked a lot about how voters can more honestly express their preferences. Another big benefit that's kind of a side effect of that is you can get a more diverse candidate pool. A lot of times, if you are somebody who is not a mainstream electable candidate, that often means heterosexual, white, male. If you are not in the right gender, age range, or other demographic, you're often overlooked in that running process. And now those candidates can run both for themselves, but also for their party without worrying about vote splitting, without worrying about creating a worse situation for everyone just because they want to bring representation to their communities. Ranked choice voting is more expressive, not just because of vote splitting, but another great benefit of ranked choice voting is that you greatly expand the amount of data that we have about voters' preferences. We kind of treat voters as a monolith. We treat them as somebody who wants to vote red or blue. And if they are voting blue in 2 different ways, they are voting extreme blue or center blue. This gives us a little bit more nuance to say that there are some Republicans who are more concerned about access to healthcare. There are more Democrats who are concerned about border security and policing. And that kind of gives you gradients that are easier to work with as you're a journalist, as you're a politician, as you're a pundit. That gives you more information.
Is the implication that the parties themselves will pay attention to that and change policy? And if so, is there any evidence to support that?
I think the hope is that, I don't think on a national party level, we're going to see broad change,
I mean, a state
especially,
party.
yes. I think if you're a candidate running and you want to win, like most candidates do, and you're seeing that in the last 3 elections, you've had a pretty substantial share of people who have ranked as socialist Democrats 3rd or 2nd. I think that might indicate to you that it's a little bit safer to express opinions that are further from the center than the traditional party is. Or in the same way, you might look and say, none of those candidates are getting ranked. I do not feel comfortable expressing.
Yeah, in theory, yes. I'm just curious if there's been any evidence that state parties have made those kind of shifts in response to this information.
It is honestly so early, and the 2 states that have done it statewide are Maine and Alaska. Alaska's only done it once.
It's there.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're getting some activity on the chat?
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, we're
That
neglecting.
person, I think she's got her hand raised. I think she's asking about vote
Oh,
splitting.
we have a raised hand.
Sandy, are you with us?
I'm not the host.
She's,
If you look in the
You have
chat.
Her question was on the screen a
might be
minute ago
able to
and it
mute
said,
herself.
can you explain vote splitting?
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, we can go back to that. Vote splitting, it's where you voting honestly for, your candidate makes a worse outcome essentially. And the example that we have here is that,
Okay, that's splitting, but, okay.
It's basically
Are we-
splitting like two similar
Split a
candidates, right?
majority.
Yeah.
yeah,
Or kind of splitting the vote because people like slightly prefer one or the other.
It's a
But they
segmentation
have
issue.
similar platforms.
Yep.
And then the other person ends up winning, who actually got less of the vote.
yeah, who
This
isn't
is
segmented.
what's colloquially known as the scalar effect.
Yes.
Except if they didn't get 50%, you still would have had a second.
But we don't do
election
that
anyway.
anymore here.
What
Can't really hear those people that are off mic.
Yeah, I don't
Sorry.
think we can do anything about that. Unless we don't have a mic to pass around, do we?
Their question.
I don't think we saw the question. Is there, yeah, do you have a way to do
Yeah,
that
there
from
it
here?
is.
Michaela, maybe you could explain
The
what
chat
happened
down
in the
below,
election
the-
with Al Gore and Ralph Nader. I mean, I think that's one that most people understand.
Sure, yeah, that's the
Okay,
kind
yeah.
of famous one. So we have, I think this was the 2000 election, please correct, I was in kindergarten, but that's my memory of it. So the 2000 election, we have three candidates running. We have George Bush, we have Al Gore, and we have Ralph Nader. This was one of the first times that there was a serious third-party candidate running. There was a pretty close neck and neck race. There were a couple of states that Ralph Nader and Al Gore were colliding in. One of the notable ones was Florida. Nader did not win any states, but there is a running theory that is heavily debated by everyone in retrospect on whether or not those votes should have been allocated to Al Gore. There's a little bit of exit polling that has suggested that those voters would have aligned more closely with Gore, and that percentage increase could have pushed Gore over the finish line in some of the key states.
So in this system, that would have put Nader into the Gore column.
Yes.
Well, it depends on
I-
what the voters.
In
say.
theory,
Yeah.
yes, in theory, if the voters had all placed Gore second,
If they placed him second.
Yeah.
yes. So Nader would have been eliminated in every single state because he didn't win a majority anywhere. He would have been the first eliminated. He was a minority candidate despite all his very hard work. If those candidates or if those voters truly did align more closely with Al Gore, they would have aligned with Al Gore's votes, and that would have turned some of those key states, including Florida. Some of the debated activity afterwards was that a lot of Nader's voters, according to his party and according to certain pollsters, say they either would not have voted because they did not like either candidate, or that they would have more closely aligned with Bush, so they would have sent those replacement votes to Bush. The difficult thing about the split party effect is that we really don't know. We're kind of like diagnosing something that hasn't happened necessarily.
So Michaela, if there had been ranked choice voting at that time,
Yes,
people would have ranked Ralph Nader as number one, and
yes,
then either Al Gore or Bush as their number two.
right.
And as Ralph Nader was eliminated, their votes would have gone to either of the other candidates.
Yes,
Correct.
that's correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Or
That
another
relates to
scenario,
the
Betsy
vote.
Johnson's number two choices, would those have gone to?
Right.
You know, Betsy Johnson voters.
Yeah, so the theory in eliminating that split vote effect is that if your unpopular first pick does not get chosen, you can still allocate to somebody that serves your best interest and is a more popular candidate.
Or in Oregon, don't we still have it that if nobody made 50%, we still would have had another vote anyway?
Yes,
No,
but
we
it is,
don't.
Wait, yeah, it's a coin flip.
We've never done runoffs in Oregon.
oh, that's right. Yeah, we don't have
It's
runoffs.
only a few states do that, I think Louisiana and a few others, but Oregon has never.
We had it here.
In Oregon,
really?
you can always win with less than a majority.
No,
It's whoever gets the most votes, not more than 50%.
Right.
So that's what this is all about.
Under the plurality system now, right?
Yeah. We've never done like a runoff a month later, the way some states do, and that's really expensive to run a whole
Right.
extra, like some states do, so I think this is trying to achieve that same thing, but instantly.
Yeah.
That's part of the advantage, but just wanted to clarify.
I know I worked at one of
We
those.
don't do that anymore.
Well, in city government, in city places, they'll have a runoff. if somebody doesn't live here.
That's true, we have the primary general kind of weird city
So
systems, which is
would
also.
this system like eliminate the electoral college?
Yeah.
Type system?
Do you want to cover the electoral?
Uh,
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
because
Yeah,
if you're putting that into the hands of voters and you're ranking like there's none of this like,
yes.
oh, someone winning the popular vote and then someone getting elected that didn't get the popular vote.
So the electoral college is kind of an artifact in itself. That this does not necessarily affect it. The kind of weird thing. So we will produce the candidate that we vote on like we do all the time, and then the electors would just have to align behind that. There is, or do you remember the name of the law, the trigger law?
Oh, I don't know the name of the law,
Yeah.
but yeah, basically once there's a compact of states that that once they get above a certain electoral total,
50%.
that they will allocate all of their electorates to the popular vote.
That's been on the books since 2000 for some reason. But we do not have enough signers. So Oregon is a signee on that, and it will go into effect if we get above the threshold of 50% of electors. We will align with the popular vote regardless of what we vote on locally. I assume that would still be the case under ranked choice voting, but that's a question for way down the road when that ever maybe happens, because we have many, many states of electors to go.
But this would address the wasted vote issue, right? Because if people voted for Robert, Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
as their number one, but they voted for a major party candidate as their number two, like their vote would actually influence the
Yes.
outcome.
Yeah, the idea is to keep wasted votes at 50%, where in non ranked choice, it can get lower. You can win by a non 50% majority, and this ensures that it's at least that level.
Just a reminder that the people who are logged in can't hear us.
Sorry.
So if the two of you would repeat the comment before
Okay,
you
yeah.
answer.
Sure, yeah,
That will help people on.
Okay.
absolutely.
See, there's 4 things. in the chat.
Yeah, do you
Oh,
have any
dang.
way
Please
to?
continue with your presentation.
I am in. I have to go
Yeah,
out.
we're almost- it's
Oh,
at
if
the
I,
bottom, yeah, the
See, it
little,
says
little
chat.
red thing where. it says
That's
the
not
four on
visible.
it.
yeah, that's, yeah, I'm on a different,
Oh, is that?
yeah, I'm only showing the part that's in the box.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely
you.
stop us if,
I can.
Try to, okay, we'll try to keep an eye on it then. Thank you.
Audience members could go to the podium and use that mic.
we can do that during the formal question phase, and we'll just try to repeat your questions.
Okay. So to wrap up this kind of site, we have ranked choice voting is more expressive. I talked a little bit about how that just gives us more information on voter preference. Encourages more candidate engagement with voters. A big thing that we have seen active in ranked choice voting is when candidates need to get second and third place votes, and that's important, they all of a sudden do a lot more work with people that don't traditionally vote for them. They spend, yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, to me, I think like my second choice vote should only receive half the vote. It shouldn't be worth as much as someone else's first choice vote, or even mine. And like a third choice would be a third vote. And then the other thing is, having worked with elderly people on doing their ballots, how they're gonna have a hard time going through a huge voters pamphlet and reading about everybody, and how is it going to affect the vote if they go ahead and only vote for one person?
Okay, can I start with your first question again? Could you, because you said what your preference was, but what is the question?
Why are we counting a second place and a third place vote with as much weight as a first place vote?
Okay.
Okay,
so-
wait, well, let me repeat it first. Okay, so the question is, why do we count the transferred votes as much as your primary vote?
I would say in addressing that spoiler effect problem, we're trying to allocate your vote as a safety net rather than like a scoring system. So we're saying, you know, I have my very first choice vote and I want to align with this person regardless of how electable they are. That second choice vote is not necessarily somebody that I align with and that I really want to see elected, but it does show as somebody who is a safety net between my favorite candidate and the worst possible candidate that could be elected. I think of ranked choice voting rather than a system that is like an approval system or a score system. It is a system of like descending safety nets that allows me to express who I am most excited about while also protecting myself from the worst possible outcome that I could see for me or my community.
I think the other part of that is if it was less than one, you would be sort of penalized for not picking the winner. And that would go back to voting strategically, which we want to avoid.
Minimize it.
Or yes, yeah.
Every system's going to have some level of
And, I
strategy,
mean, you might 50% of older people might only vote for one person.
right. And so let's address that question
Yes.
second.
Okay, yeah, so the question is, what happens if you only vote once or the ballot is incomplete?
Yeah. So if you only vote for one person, it acts as a vote. Traditionally, if you are somebody unfamiliar, Maine is the best study on this. Alaska hasn't done it long enough and the cities are much smaller. Maine is the best study on this. They did find that ranked choice voting, unfortunately, is much more, it's generally very acceptable to the population. People pick it up quickly. The people who are disproportionately affected are elderly people. They do overall get it, but if anyone is least likely to get it, it's the elderly. That being said, if you're familiar with traditional voting and you've already made up your mind between the two major party candidates that you have heard of and know about, and you're not interested in doing any of the third party, your vote counts as a vote. You don't need to rank everybody. Your vote goes down the ballot as few or as many times as you've listed people. So if you've only voted for one person, congratulations, that's your vote.
I just want to comment, sorry to interrupt. This would be a good time to ask questions, but not to debate the points. Because we're going to have a point where I'm going to ask for that debate later.
Sure.
Okay,
Feel free, and then you repeat.
okay.
Okay, and that last point being increased campaign civility, those 2 points kind of go together. Candidates treat each other nicer when candidates are nicer to each other when they know that they're trying to collect replacement votes. The couple of times that people have run really negative campaign ads in the first round of ranked choice voting, they learned very quickly not to do that in the second round. So you're going around collecting votes from communities your party doesn't typically reach out to. You're collecting votes from people who may be aligned with your candidate without directly competing with your colleagues. It just makes voter outreach a lot more strong amongst communities that are typically underrepresented. And it also makes candidates just nicer in the election environment, more positive.
Yep, and mostly for the spoiler effect. Yeah, bringing in additional candidates who don't have to worry about being a spoiler as much anymore, and making it maybe not, even though you might have to fill out more bubbles, we want to make it tactically or strategically easier for you to vote, and just putting your preferences down instead of having to look at the field, see who's going to get this percentage, who's likely to win, who's not likely to win, and casting a single vote based on that. Okay, there were some additional topics of interest that we addressed in the paper as well. And after this, I think we're going to move on. Actually, how are we doing on time? Okay. Yeah, so we'll address these and then move on to some more specific issues that I think will address some of the parts of some of the questions that have already come up. So do you want to start on Alaska?
Sure. Alaska is probably the hot button topic. It is not the first place or even state to implement ranked choice voting. But recently there was a big shakeup election between two Republican candidates and a Democratic candidate. Our characters are Nick Begich, a Republican. He was the official Republican nominee. He was supported by the Alaskan Republican Party. There is Sarah Palin of fame. She won the Republican primary, even though she was not endorsed by the party. And then Democrat Mary Peltola, who ultimately won the race. The shakedown of that race at basic, Nick Begich was eliminated in the first round. He had the minority of votes. Those votes transferred. A portion of them went to Sarah Palin, a portion of them went to Mary Peltola. As a result, in that final showdown between Palin and Peltola, Peltola had a majority share of the remaining votes. It is.
But Sarah had more than Peltola after the first vote.
No, actually Peltola from the beginning, I have a slide that roughly breaks it down, but.
Oh, do you want me to
Peltola-
go to that?
If it's not trouble.
Yeah.
It might be too much work. Just pick any one of the black circle ones.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, this one.
Yeah, so you have that kind of vague graphic here. Begich, they're small names, unfortunately. But Begich at the top there, Palin in the red and Peltola in the blue. Yeah, Peltola, if this was a plurality vote, Peltola would have won from the beginning. Of course, I don't think two Republicans would have run if this was a plurality vote. And this is the main argument that a lot of people have brought up, is that a majority of people in Alaska voted for a Republican candidate. And this is kind of the big showstopper that a lot of people are readdressing. A big problem with looking at it that way is that we are considering this to be a Republican race. Over 50% of voters in Alaska are not party affiliated. Alaska is traditionally a Republican state. That's not necessarily true for this exact position. Peltola is also a Democrat. She also is an extremely centrist Democrat. She worked very closely with Don Young, the person who she was replacing. He died in office. She only had 3 months to serve. She was reelected 3 months later when they had the general primary with this exact same breakdown again. Begich is eliminated first. As you can see, the majority of Begich's votes go to Palin. They are just not enough to offset what lead Peltola already had and the additional amount that Begich's voters sent over. You'll see in the middle there, each of them have circles that are outlined by a color. It's probably hard to see, but that 12 votes in the center under Begich, the 25 next to Peltola, and 23 next to Palin, it's in the middle of their 3 sections. Those are exhausted ballots. Those are people who voted for only one candidate. For Begich, when those people decided not to rank anybody else on the ballot, those votes were kind of discarded from the next round of percentages. They weren't disqualified. He still had that percentage of votes, but they don't move on to the next rank. You will notice Palin has a very high amount. That is because Palin actively campaigned that she would not be ranking anybody on the ballot. She did not believe in ranked choice voting. She did not rank anybody but herself, and she kind of went on the campaign trail for that. I would argue in this specific election, in this specific case, that this was not a case of 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. This was a case of 3 extremely different candidates in an extremely polarized environment. It's important to remember a lot of the broader political contexts of 2022 of this specific House seat, of the fact that Sarah Palin had gone from an 89% approval rating from her beginning of term as governor to about a 30% approval rating as she left office to pursue her reality TV show. Nick Begich was a popular candidate. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you look at the Sue Murkowski case too?
A little. Sorry, the question was if we had looked at the Lisa Murkowski case. We looked at it a little. This is mainly as an illustrative example of like kind of the worst case scenario. We looked at a couple different races. There's one in Virginia that split pretty crazy. There was one in Maine recently that split a little unexpectedly. This is kind of the one that's most centered in the news. So we spent a lot of time on reviewing that as a case study. Yeah.
Do you think that the controversy around this suggests that ranked choice voting would work better for like nonpartisan offices if we didn't? Because it seems like the party affiliation is maybe what is getting people riled up.
Yeah.
It's like a majority of people voted for a Republican, but if it was just 3 people, then it's just some people voted second for one person. You know,
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
The question is, would ranked choice voting be suited well suited for nonpartisan positions as well?
Yeah, or like not
Better
ignite so
suited.
much of this sort of controversy or concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a way that I like to look at it is Palin in 2007 started the Tea Party. If we treated this as a Republican, a Democrat, and a Tea Party candidate, would it still be as exciting? If we treated Begich as a Green Party candidate, would we still be excited? Maine's votes typically split on Green Party and Liberal candidates. So when they transition to a ranked choice, those Green parties predictably aligned to the Democratic Party.
Did they have a primary for Democrats and Republicans?
No,
So if they
that's
would have, then it might have turned out the Republicans would have won, because they would have picked who they wanted for the Republican Party, and then that person probably would have.
The Republicans did pick somebody, not in a primary process, but they
If they would have had
did.
the primary, then it would have been down to 2 for the general election.
well, there is, they do have a primary. It's just an open
It's
primary.
one
and
big
it's-
open line.
It's, I think it's
They
top
had-
4.
Instead of
Yes,
1 for each party.
yes.
Well, that doesn't make sense.
Alaska, man.
It's what it is, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, 'cause you-
It seems to me that, there's not much ground to stand on for a Republican stance that says, the problem was with the Democrats doing something to us. It looks like they took careful aim and shot themselves in the foot. This has nothing to do with ranked choice voting and everything to do with the failure of Republicans to come together.
Okay, the comment is that it wasn't the system that that in Alaska caused, or it wasn't the system. Shoot.
ranked choice voting didn't produce a Democratic bias. It was something that Republicans didn't correctly prepare for. And we don't hear a lot about the 2 people who were Republicans that were elected to state legislature via ranked choice voting in the same election. The kind of fallout of this election that's really interesting, again, this was like a really brief microcosm as almost a test run for this specific seat. And then 3 months later, she had to be reelected. It split the exact same way. Palin approached Begich asking him to drop out of the race so that they wouldn't split the vote again. He refused. I'm not saying he should have dropped out of the race. I'm saying maybe they should have worked together a little more on campaign civility. This is what I mean, that there's been a couple of elections where we've had people, this happened in Minneapolis, this happened in St. Paul. That very first election, people kept that plurality system in mind as they were running their elections, as they were campaigning, as they were reaching out to voters. And they very quickly learned that this is a different environment to act in. I personally prefer that system because it shifts that strategy that we have to use in elections, this mind game that we as voters were doing to try to pick the most electable person. It shifts that burden of strategizing onto the campaigner. It changes it to our elected officials who have to come to us and ask for the strategy they want us to implement.
And, oh,
Yeah, can I clarify one thing that I think I heard you say earlier that I don't think is correct, which is you said this will only apply to general elections, not primaries. I looked at the report and the ballot description that's in the report. It says pretty clearly it is primaries and general for state executive office.
it is.
It is. We don't have open primaries.
Well, no, yes, both the primaries and the general election will be ranked choice.
Apologies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And as a follow-up to the Alaska situation or scenario, in contrast to what they have, which is an open top 4 primary, we will be retaining our primaries. And the comment in the report that we said was that we think that primaries actually sort of mitigate the effects of how broad candidates have to campaign, because smaller subsets eliminating candidates. We're worried about smaller subsets eliminating candidates that would have cross-party appeal. And it's unlikely that we'll, while the primaries are still in effect, we'll run into a situation like this. There will probably only be 2 viable candidates. We also have a sore loser law as well, where if you run in the primary, you can't run as an independent. So they'd have to know from the beginning that they were running as an independent. So we probably won't see this type of result. And as a follow-up to the one rank, because of that, if you only rank one person, it's probably pretty likely that the vote won't need to transfer. And it probably will just go and vote normally, but there still is a risk.
Then the party you really want might lose because you didn't pick a second or third person in that party.
Well,
But that hasn't changed from plurality voting for you.
Yeah, you would, yeah, if you only vote one time, you are voting plurality essentially. Yeah.
We had, I mean, a majority of these voters, Peltola and Palin, 23 and 25 each, voted only once. They said, I do not care. And in this election, 70% of the exhausted ballots on the walkout said, I really only liked one candidate. It wasn't, I was confused, I didn't know how to do it. It was, I only liked this one. No one else would do. I think we should trust them on that.
And then the last thing we wanted to address was the, sort of mentioned this before, the politicization of the issue with a lot of Republican states. Oh, I guess I can go back to slideshow. A lot of Republican states banning ranked choice voting. We did not find any evidence that this affects one party over another. And yeah, we just basically don't think this is really a partisan issue. It's just a structural change issue.
Did those places where they did that, after ranked choice voting, did the results switch for which party won? I mean, was it already the same? Was it the same anyway?
The question is, as a result of ranked choice voting, did the rate of parties winning swap or change in any way?
So I think this is kind of a data set problem again, because there's a mixed answer. Maine used ranked choice voting recently to replace their Republican governor term limited with a Democrat. Not a shocker, Maine goes back and forth all the time. It's a very purple state. Alaska, typically Republican. Most of the people elected under ranked choice voting were also Republican. This was kind of a surprise shakeup, but it was also for a single House representative seat. And it has not historically been Republican forever. It's kind of a seat that in recent memory has been Republican, but has gone back and forth. And this is, again, a very centrist candidate. So it's an unusual thing. I don't think any more unusual than Oklahoma City electing Kendra Horn as a very blue Democrat in a very red state. Sometimes upsets happen sitting. Yeah.
Is it a question you asked on the screen?
Oh,
sorry.
The
Did
question is,
states
yes.
reverse themselves and get rid of?
So to address Sandy's question, didn't one state reverse themselves to get rid of RCV? We haven't had any states overturn it. Alaska is voting this year to overturn it. A lot of cities are going back.
I think, is Baltimore one of them?
I do not know them off the top
can't-
of my head. I know
think
that,
might be one.
I know that,
You're right, I think Baltimore.
Okay, yeah.
But they had multi.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, they had this single transferable vote that Portland is doing.
yeah. We have had several jurisdictions go back on ranked choice voting. More broadly, what is happening is in the fallout after the 2022 Alaska special election, Republicans kind of clamped down on this as an issue. And a lot of states really suddenly in 2022 and 2023 signed into law that you could not do any voting but plurality in those states, which affects ranked choice voting, but would also affect things like approval, ranked robin, anything that is not a strictly plurality system is being banned in those places.
Cool. And with that, oh, yes.
Continue, I'll close
Oh,
out.
okay. Well, I guess this is sort of bleeding into the questions portion. We could close out and then dive into predicting some, okay, we'll do that.
Say by plurality, you mean the regular system? where-
Yes,
the
that's
system
correct.
we have now is
Yeah, and,
plurality.
Yeah, the comment was that the plurality is equivalent to the system that we have now. We've gotten used to using the fancy words as we dive deeper into this, so.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for that incredibly rich discussion. Can we give them another round of applause? In the interest of time, try to move this a little bit forwards. We've got another period for some more discussions. You have more questions, you can ask them. We want to invite our two hosts to participate in the discussion. And now I want to invite John here to close this out and move over to the next section.
Thanks. I told you that our committee members become experts, and you can tell that they have. I've certainly done that. We follow our bylaws when we vote on reports that the City Club has sponsored. And the first step is once we receive the report from the research committee, the research board itself takes a look at it and decides whether to approve it or not. But the inquiry at that point is it a fair analysis of the facts? What is the scope of inquiry, and was that a proper scope that the committee took on? And are the conclusions supported by the facts gathered? That's the limitation of what the research board can determine. Your research board approved this report based on that criteria. The next step is it goes to the Board of Governors, and the Board of Governors applies the very same criteria to determine whether to approve the report. And the Board of Governors in this case has approved the report using that criteria. Now it's up to a vote of the members. And the vote of the members is different. The vote of the members determines whether it wants to adopt the conclusions and recommendations. In fact, the question here is whether this study report on ranked choice voting should be the official position of the city club. I'd now like to invite a motion. A motion is in order.
Can I ask a question first?
Not yet.
Okay. Wait for the motion.
And the motion would be to adopt the ranked choice voting report as the official position of the city club. Do I hear that motion?
So
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now the floor is open for discussion and debate. And you can ask questions.
I
Okay.
have one. How much am I?
Oh,
yeah, that's
do we
fine.
want to, I think it makes sense to do that
Yeah,
now.
folks come up with their
It's
questions.
pretty easy. I mean, I was just gonna ask him.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't hear it
So,
though,
If you
yeah.
have a question, pop up here.
Okay.
Yep.
And let me say, this is not limited to questions. If you have an opinion or an idea or perspective, now is the time to get that out.
I was just having worked elections at 3 different counties. I was just concerned about the process of tabulating the votes and if they will be done in time by the deadline. If you had anybody you talked to at elections offices and stuff about the processing.
So yeah, no interviews of specifically election officials. I think we tried to contact, but we weren't able to get in contact with them. We did find that, especially since this is new, there are sometimes implementation hiccups, and we have found a lot of cases where it takes longer to tabulate. So I don't know if how they're going to potentially adjust, maybe push back the deadline or anything like that. But we thought that it was a manageable problem that would be overcome over time as we get more familiar. But there definitely is a possibility that it takes longer at the beginning.
I think getting that short answer is going to take longer because you're going through several rounds and people are watching as you're going through several rounds. You eliminate someone and then we have to recount everything again, basically. I think that is built into the process. Of course, your results are not certified on election night. You have quite a bit of time before those results are actually like certified, recounted, and reconsidered. So getting the fast result is going to take longer. Getting the like certified, real, and complete result, I can't imagine it'll be worse than 2020. So.
So main thing I want to say is great report. I'm a supporter, but I do have a kind of a question. For those in the room who are familiar with previous research reports, you know that sometimes when a report is written, there's a minority report. There's a smaller percentage of the overall committee who basically disagree with the results and so write a side report. And I'm just wondering, because I haven't heard, was there a side report of any sort in this regard?
There was no side report this time in this report. However, do you want to talk about the discussion?
We had kind of towards the middle of this process. I think a lot of us, as we interviewed election experts, professors, people who are extremely familiar with electoral science on a level I could never dream to be, we all kind of developed our favorite systems that I think we all in an ideal world felt would be a great substitute for ranked choice voting, things that met better criterions or things that we were more excited about. We went through the pros and cons. All of us have our kind of preferences. I think the end result that we came to after talking to some political experts was that those systems aren't likely to get in place. And this is kind of the shot we have now. STAR was a big talking point at the very beginning. STAR was invented here in Oregon. It has failed in all 3 districts that they have tried to implement it in.
Could you please say what the acronym stands for?
STAR is score, score, then automatic runoff. Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
I was just looking at it too. I was like,
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question was what STAR stands for. STAR is score then automatic runoff. This was recently in Eugene was, I think, the most recent election. They've also tried it in Lane County and Troutdale. It has not passed so far. I think it is a very interesting system, but it doesn't seem to have great odds electorally. Approval voting is also really popular. It has been repealed in Fargo, North Dakota after being implemented. It narrowly missed repeal in another city, St. Louis, I think. Actually, I think I have this backwards. I think it was repealed in St. Louis, narrowly avoided it in North Dakota because the governor vetoed it. Does not seem like that has a great odds of being implemented if we were to scrap ranked choice voting and start over. I think one of the big favorites that we had was ranked robin voting, also known as Condorcet voting. Also seems like a great system, functionally has not been implemented anywhere but like committees and boards. It has not really been implemented politically.
A clarification on that, ranked robin would be substituting the IRV portion. So it changes how we count. It would still be ranked choice.
Yeah.
We found that it just had better properties, and we liked the results of that better. That was the subject of debate among definitely some of the committee members. Like, do we hold off on this and wait for maybe ranked choice with ranked robin? And we decided that we would take it as is.
Can you explain Robin?
Ranked robin is think of it like, well, yeah, sort of like a round robin. Everyone sort of goes head to head against each other, and you get scores of how many people you beat, basically. And people are ranked based on that. And then whoever wins against the most people wins the election, instead of it sort of happening more sequentially with instant runoff voting, whereas like one person was eliminated. In this, it sort of happens all at once.
So if we were treating this Alaska breakdown, Begich would have actually been the ranked robin winner, because when you tally up the votes of people who prefer Begich to Palin, which is all of the Begich voters, plus that chunk of Peltola voters that would place him second, that amount of people, and then Palin plus Begich versus Peltola, and then Palin versus Peltola. When you do those head-to-head matchups, Begich wins against both of those people.
So not to interrupt, because, but just to make John's point that you dug deep on
Yes.
this. And I want to summarize and let other people talk or make comments, which is that it sounds like you actually ultimately, as a committee, use sort of an informal ranked choice voting system to figure out that the ranked choice voting in front of us was the best, maybe not the best, but close enough to the best opportunity. So I'm going to summarize there, leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. I'm Sam Metz, a board member. I'd like to point out that the charge to the research committee was not what's the best method of voting in Oregon. Their charge was, would Oregon be better off voting for this measure or voting against it? I believe they've made a convincing case that Oregon would be better off with this than without it. I have one comment about the relevance of what we're talking about here. Dennis Linthicum is the Republican candidate for Secretary of State. He says if he is elected, he will do his best to eliminate mail-in ballots in Oregon. This upcoming Secretary of State election has 3 candidates: a Democrat, a Republican, and a Pacific Green candidate. Imagine the influence of ranked choice voting on this upcoming Secretary of State election. I believe we will be grateful in elections to come that we here at the City Club officially adopted the favorable report of this research committee?
Thank you. I do see a hand in the chat. We will get to you after this.
Great, and I'm Bobby Regan on the board also. One of the things that gives me hope around ranked choice voting is that the city of Portland and Multnomah County are going to be doing this before the state does. I don't think this measure goes into effect until 2028. Is that true?
Yes.
So I think that that gives me a lot of hope going forward, because I think the state will have an opportunity to kind of see what's working and what's not working, and the elections folks can all be chatting about that as they go. The quick question I had for you is, how is this measure different than what the city of Portland and Multnomah County are going to be doing going forward? If you could just share that.
Yes. We made somewhere in here. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Can you make that read?
Oh, yes. It's easier to navigate when it's not in slideshow. Addressing the question. So what Portland actually will, for the mayor, they will be adopting instant runoff voting because there's only one person to elect. But for the city council positions, they will be doing something called single transferable vote or proportional representation. There's many names for this, but the similarities, they both have an elimination process of candidates that are ranked the least. The difference is that, well, the biggest difference is that you're electing multiple people. But what happens is you calculate the threshold. So Portland will have 3 candidates. So the threshold will be 25%. Anyone that is above that, their votes are, the excess votes are transferred to other candidates, and then a candidate is eliminated, and then those votes are transferred, and you repeat the process until you have all of your winners. And that is the essential difference. Are there any follow-up questions on that? Did I explain that well, or okay, we'll buy it.
It's a confusing.
Yeah.
Some people would be voting for 3 Democrats that ended up 1, 2, and 3.
We have to go, Mike, do you want to take the person that's not ready to chat?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sandy, thank you for reminding me.
Yes, thank you. Actually, this is part of what I was interested in, because what you described was so different from what I've heard described for Portland. And the Portland one drives me crazy, because you take the 25 and then the rest you give to their second, but you're not paying attention to who you're counting and who you're not. Is it just potluck who gets counted first and has to go to their second? I mean, theoretically, voter A voted for John and Mary as their second person, and candidate B voted for John and Evelyn. And depending on which one of them gets their vote counted, Mary or Evelyn gets that second vote after you eliminate the one you used. And it drives me nuts. When I heard you explain, I think that what this proposal has is dropping, not looking at who has the most, but looking at who has the least and dropping them out.
So,
or did I misunderstand?
this is a good question. So I did leave out this detail, and a lot of explanations leave this out. You would be correct that if who you selected above the threshold was completely random, that could, depending on who you selected, it could change the outcome of the election. So what what is done is you take everyone who voted for that candidate, and you assign, you take fractions of all of the second place votes in there, and you you calculate the fractions that each second place candidate has, and then transfer that amount to the subsequent candidate. So it's sort of normalized, and it's not dependent. And that's called fractional transfer. And I believe that is what Portland is adopting. So it will not be random who is selected above the threshold.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone, I'm Zach Wagner.
That makes me feel much better.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy.
I'm Zach Wagner, longtime member. And just wanted to, thank you for all the work on this. I do support the conclusion. I do think one of the advantages on this topic is, we could debate all day the single transferable vote that Portland is using, but we already voted for charter reform. It'll be an interesting test, and we'll see if it goes the way of Baltimore, where they decide it's too complicated, we don't like it, or it's kind of inherent to multi-member districts. But I do think this measure, the instant runoff voting, is very relatively simple, easy to understand. And I think the main benefits I see for it in Oregon would be when we have a third-party candidate in the general election that, like in that Green Party example or something like that, if somebody is running to the left of a Democrat or to the right of a Republican, in the current system, there's a risk that those two people's supporters combined would be a majority. But in the current system, they could split the votes, and the person who really has a minority of the support could just squeak by with the plurality. So I think that, I'm sure that has happened in Oregon. It's gotten very close to happening in Oregon. So, and then also just letting people vote their conscience, because people who do really support that person don't have to kind of feel bad about voting that person number one, because they have that backup. And I think, like you were saying, if you really don't like a candidate, I would just not rank them at all. And maybe your vote won't end up, mattering, but there's no, it's like you said, it's kind of a backup plan. Your person that you could live with, but maybe is not your favorite. So I do think this could address a lot of issues. And like you said, the primary system kind of might reduce the issues when you have just 20 people running or something like that. Like the most we'll probably have are 3 or 4 at the most. And a lot of times it'll just be 2. So I think this is a worthy reform to try. I do wish the state and the representatives and senators were also subject to it. It's very strange that we're not going to use it for them, but we'll use it for everyone else. But maybe that could be a future reform. So yeah, I support this.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the idea. This is sort of a first step, and it's like if it passes, the message would be that like Oregon is for vote reform, and then I think subsequent modifications based on talking to some of the people we interviewed, they believed that it was more likely that subsequent reforms might be adopted, or that they'd have the political willpower to get through.
So we're running a little late, such that John Stride had to leave to another meeting. So he's given me the podium for just a second to make a comment or two, and then to turn it over to Amira. Before I do, I want to see in particular online, because we have left you out a little bit online there in terms of hearing some of the conversation. If there's any last questions, maybe from there. I haven't seen anybody else in the room walk up to the front at this point. If there's nothing from the chat, then I think we'll go ahead and close. And what I'm going to say before Amira takes over and she's gonna have a few people make a couple of announcements about upcoming events for City Club. What I was supposed to remind you is that we're doing something a little different. We've opened the motion, we've seconded the motion, but we are not having the vote right now. What we are doing is emailing all of you, people here online and other members who were not able to make it, but have had a chance or will have had a chance to look at the reports to vote. You'll be given, I think it's a couple of days to do so. That will be your opportunity to vote. So thank you for this part of it, but now the voting goes to you through an email that'll head out, I think it is tomorrow. My part is done. Amira, you're gonna come up here. Oh,
Does it require 2/3 vote to get a recommendation?
so this is where, if John were here, it'd be great because he's our parliamentarian, basically.
Majority.
I think it's
Just a
just.
simple majority? Thank you.
Okay, so the question for the people is, what kind of percentage do we need to approve this? It's 50 plus 1. Yeah, majority vote.
For the club to be able to advocate, isn't that a higher threshold or have they changed that?
Not for ballot measure studies.
Oh, okay.
Right, a little bit different than other sort of things. Yeah, so the question is about ballot measure studies like this one. Do you need a higher threshold of the city club members supporting it to advocate for it? Not in the case of ballot measures, other types of things that we ask for support from the city club members. Okay, I'll turn it over to Amira and she'll wrap us up.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. That was extremely informative. Another round of applause. All right, so we're going to hear from our programming committee co-chair and our issues committee co-chair tonight to hear what other events we have planned going on. First, I'll call up Bobby and then Wynn afterwards.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby Regan, and I'm co-chair of the programming committee with Sam Metz, who is just an incredible partner with me. Thank you, Michaela, Clay, John, Jordan, and others for this amazing evening and for all the hard work that you did. City Club is back, and it feels so good. So I wanted to tonight just give a quick programming update for you in terms of quick glance around upcoming programs. In 2 weeks, on Thursday, September 5th, we hope you will join us for a debate between Multnomah County Commission District 1 candidates. That would be Megan Moyer and Vadim Mazursky. District 1 is primarily the west side of Portland. That debate will take place at 5:30 p.m. at University Place Hotel, which is right near PSU. And then 4 days later, on Monday, November 9th, we'll hold a District 2 Multnomah County Commission debate. And those candidates are Shannon Singleton and Sam Adams. So District 2 is primarily north and northeast Portland. And that debate will also take place at 5:30, but it will be at the Alberta Rose Theater in North Portland. And I'm so excited. We are going to have both events moderated by Willamette Week journalist Anthony Effinger. And we met with him and he's going to be really dynamic. I'm so excited. We will then host a Portland mayoral debate on Tuesday, October 8th at 5:30 at the First Congregation Church in downtown Portland. That debate will be moderated by Jeff Mapes. Most of you know him as a former political journalist with the Oregonian and Oregon Public Broadcasting. Let's see, the next one for sure will be on October 16th, and that is going to be an evening with Congressman Earl Blumenauer, and he is going to share reflections on his esteemed career. That will be at the Alberta Rose Theater. And then we are still working on 2 other potential debates for October. One would be a Congressional District 6 candidate forum, and the other would be a state attorney general debate. So we've got lots coming up for you. So thank you all for joining us in person and also virtually. I'm going to hand it over to Wynn to do an issues committee report, or John. And I would also remind you all, at least here in the room, to stick around and mingle afterwards if you would like. Have a great evening.
We met recently. We don't have anything set up for sure yet. We're looking at different dates and getting the speakers. But we plan on continuing the It Takes a Village series. We're gonna have the Central Precinct Commander and probably Union Gospel Mission and Central City Concern. And we also have Judge David Reese in the START organization. We're looking at also getting addiction people in, like after the election, have like Mike Marshall and Keith Wilson come speak. And then some other events we're looking at. Nathan Vasquez already told me he would come and talk for us about what he wants to do as the new district attorney. And we're still looking at doing an event with Jordan Schnitzer on art collections. And another one we came up with, and I'm going to ask Kels, the Wednesday, the election's the 5th. So we're talking about Wednesday, the 13th, having a party at Kells and have it be, I call it PEP, post-election party, and invite all the candidates who ran all over the place and have us all just get together and have a good time. And Jonathan has some ideas for things too.
Yes, the Built Environment Committee is going to start meeting regularly, probably twice a month, at Elephant's Deli in Northwest on 22nd. I am going to reach out personally over email to everyone who's expressed interest in the committee and triangulate which days of the month and days of the week are best for the most people. So stay tuned. Thank you.
And I'm Colleen Shoemaker, Chair of the Membership Committee. And first, I want to thank you all for being members of City Club. You are what and who makes City Club. We can't do it without you. And this committee, the research study group proves that. And I look forward to a lot more opportunities for all of you to find ways to participate. I'm here to tell you that on Wednesday, September 18th, there's going to be a welcome event at the home of a City Club member. You read a little bit about it in last week's bulletin. You'll be getting reminders about it in the next few, but everyone is welcome. We especially want new members to come to meet other City Club members, but it's a wonderful opportunity to get together and chat as we're able to do tonight. So thank you all for being members.
Well, that is the end of our program for tonight. I just want to thank all of you for being here and listening to our research report. Thank you to everyone online as well for hanging in there and asking your really great questions. Folks in the room are welcome to stay and mingle and chat until about 8 o'clock and have some more snacks, please. And we will see you at the next City Club event. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.